Welcome in, everybody, to the first one of this year, Grace Story question and answers. We've got a couple experts with us. We have Amber Jones, the president and founder of Grace Story Ministries. And we also have Ryan, who is one of our content strategy experts and a licensed counselor. And we're going to be going through some of your questions today. Some have already been sent in, but as you're listening in or you're watching in this meeting, we'd love it if you would jump into the free Grace Story app, either on Google Play or if you go over to your Apple Store, jump in there, download the free Grace Story app, and right on the first screen is we're live, ask a question. You can put your name and email in there if you like, but if you want to stay anonymous, Anonymous is our number one client. They love it in there. So just do the anonymous, and it's going to pop up right on my screen, and I will throw that question over within reason, of course. Probably won't discuss the end times today or something like that, so we'll stay on topic. But certainly about relationships, things like that. That's kind of our theme the last month or so over with the blog, the newsletter, and also in Grace Story podcast, which if you haven't subscribed to that, anywhere you get your podcast, Spotify, on the Google Play, on your Android, and then also in the Apple podcast, of course, Grace Story podcast, all sorts of great episodes, over 120 some episodes for you to listen to and get back through. So if you want to send us a message, Grace Story app, jump in there. We'll be looking at that. I want to jump right in with Amber and Ryan because we do have a few questions already sent in. And this one over to Amber. It says, can you talk about the ambiguous grief of being a daughter of an addict or parent with chronic illness, grieving someone's death before they die? And Ryan, jump on that too. But that's a heavy, heavy question and a very real question for a lot of people in the Grace Story community.
Yeah, and I will definitely get to that. But I also think there are probably some folks on here or listening who might be hearing Ryan and I for the first time,
Oh,
might
yeah.
be used to hearing you on the podcast, and have maybe touched out a few episodes where we've been, but just to give a quick hello and introduction of who I am. I'm Amber Jones, and I live in the middle of nowhere, central Michigan, because my husband is a large animal vet, so we live where the cows are. I came from the heart of downtown Cincinnati, where I grew up in a Bible college, and that was just quite an incredible experience, such a unique experience to grow up there. There were a lot of messages that I took in as I grew up on just a campus where we heard all the ways that you got to God. And then also, as we've shared different times, so go back and listen to some old episodes, some of those very first early Grace Story podcast episodes, but where we shared parts of my story. But growing up in a home where we had a really good PR outlook as a fundamental conservative Christian family, but behind closed doors, there was abuse of all kinds happening. And when I started Grace Story in 2019, I had so much hope for the people that were going to now be connected to resources. And so that is what just sort of helped me launch Grace Story. And throughout that time, it has been such a powerful and humbling experience to be able to connect with families who are just ready for that next step where they felt like something has been off and they're not ready to give up on God and they're not ready to give up on their families, but they really don't know where to turn. And so just being that intersection where faith and mental health come together and we just say, hey, we're here with you. We're here to walk this with you and connect you with some really great evidence-based resources that you can trust. So that's where we kind of are as a Grace Story team. And I continue to be on that journey with you. I like to say, I really am just a friend on this journey with you. I'm learning, I'm continuing to do my own counseling, grow here. And I'm sure when it comes to Ryan, do you want to go ahead and just introduce yourself and then I'll go into answering the question?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay.
As Amber mentioned, my name is Ryan Waters, and I live and work in Cincinnati at a counseling practice called the Counseling Alliance. And I've worked here since 2017. And here at the practice, we specialize in working with trauma, intimacy disorders like sex, porn addiction, betrayal, and a lot of marriage counseling as well. So that's kind of my area of focus, and of course there are things outside of that that come through our doors, but that's what we see a lot of here and what a lot of my time is spent working with folks through. Personally, I've been married to Danielle for just about 12 years. It'll be 12 years in September, and we have two awesome kids, Grace and Stephen, who give us our run for our money on any given day. But been with GraceStory for roughly 10 years. I kind of lost track there somewhere along the line, but have been honored to be a part of the GraceStory team here for a little bit and looking forward to tonight as well. So I'll turn it back to you, Amber.
Yeah, so the question was about being the child of someone who is an addict or has a chronic illness, and essentially, how are we grieving um, someone's death before they die? Was that the original question?
Yeah.
While I don't have a parent that is necessarily an addict or has a chronic illness, I know we have those in our community that I care very deeply about who have walked this road, and I'm sure would have so much that they could say to this, the ways they could speak to this, and the ways God has drawn close, and the lessons they have learned. Um, I think the way that I can identify with this is just as I've mentioned, we grew up with a lot of dysfunction, and um, the ways we hope for our family can often look different when they come. And so for me, and Nate's my brother, he's part of this, but um, our family has recently, my parents' marriage has come to an end after 40 plus years. And I think for me, there is a grief that is profound. I don't have a lot of contact with my dad anymore. And for me, I guess I've done a lot of journaling around this idea. And one of my journals wrote, there should be flowers. There should be flowers for people who are grieving, for people silently that are still alive, but yet you feel that loss profoundly in the milestones. My son is having his open house for graduation this weekend as we're recording, and missing those people's presence. And so I would say, as you're already preparing, you know that a loved one is going to pass, or if there's someone that you don't have contact with, but you are able to stalk them on Facebook, or you're able to see that they continue their lives in other ways, there is a grief that you hold. And I would say that that is something that just truly does need to be taken to Jesus. And you can find I find a lot of value in taking that to my counselor as well, and navigating that grief process, because you are missing out. You can already like see ahead to those moments that you anticipate missing. They're not going to be at my kid's wedding, or I'm going to miss seeing them have their 50th wedding anniversary, or whatever that moment may be. It is a very real grief, whether they're still with you, and you're working through those last goodbyes in person, or if it's someone that you haven't had contact with, but you just know that you're missing out on that.
Ryan, any thoughts on that before we move on to the next question?
Just to affirm that what Amber was saying, that uh, it can be an extra lonely process because there's not the obvious, oh, there's a funeral, here's the viewing. And so it's really important to have someone who does see it, a close friend, a counselor, someone who says like, oh yeah, I can imagine what that would be like to be in that position, to feel that pain, but to not be able to share it as broadly as maybe you could if it were something more obvious or public.
And
But
if I can add, I
yeah.
think that even to include in this group are those who have worked through miscarriage. And I
Mhm.
think it's becoming more common
Yeah.
to post that that kind of loss on a social media page or to share with your friend group for a very long time though. And I think even still some today, there's a little bit of that, well, like, I should just, I don't know how people would take that. I don't want to make people feel uncomfortable, but it's a very, very, very real life that was within you. And again, you're going to have those moments where you're projecting those milestones where this was the due date. This is where I'm
Mhm.
missing those first
Mhm.
steps. And Heidi Weatherald talked about this. I'm not sure if we shared that one on the podcast, Nate, or not, but it's
No,
in
we
our
shared a part of it.
archives. Okay. It is on our archives. And if you go to our app, you can watch the archives exclusive and free right through there. So go check that one out. But she shares her journey of this personally, where just the postpartum depression and just holding her son for just a couple hours. And again, that's another very real grief that is often a lonely, more
Mhm.
silent, hidden process.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have a friend going through that right now where they get it changes things too because like they were planning on having their maternity leave and now they actually only get 2 weeks, but it was a stillbirth.
Yeah.
So, there's still the birth process and it's a whole thing.
And your body still has to heal and you
Sure.
still
Yeah.
have the hormones. So, yeah, just I think the takeaway from this question would be no matter what the situation is, grief is still a very real emotion. It's still a very real process. And whether you feel like you're entitled to have that process, because culturally you're experiencing something that culturally everybody says this is where it's a rational time to grieve or not, you know yourself, you know your body, and you know those situations, and it's still very real. It's not something to minimize, and if we're the only people that give you permission to grieve that loss, whatever it may be, um, I hope you hear that tonight, and then take that and find someone who will witness that story, that loss with you, and hold it as sacred without discounting it.
This question here, I'm going to throw it to Ryan, and this is the fun of this because it's live and it's free counseling for an hour and a half. But this one comes in on the free Grace Story app right there on the front. Type in your question, send it in. I'm looking for them. This person says, after leaving a spousal relationship, some individuals are overwhelmed with sudden responsibility for everything. Haven't learned to not talk to their partner about their needs, needing to be self sufficient. They find it difficult to ask others for help. Any thoughts?
Empathy. That's a really tough place to be, and as I mentioned in our practice, do a lot of marriage counseling work and have been honored to see inside a lot of challenging situations in marriages. And this is one of them that comes up from time to time. And the short answer um, is you need to ideally find someone who can help you learn that it's safe to ask for what you need, that it's safe to ask for what you need and want, and to help you figure out what it is that you even need and want. And some of that requires identity work. And that is the kind of thing that tends to be best handled within the safe walls of a counseling room where someone can help you figure out, like, all right, who really am I? Who really am I apart from this relationship that maybe was very painful for me? Or maybe the ways I had to adapt to stay safe in that environment. Okay, well, now that I'm on my own, um, I get to set my own course. I was actually talking to someone today who I said, you get to be in the driver's seat of your life. And they said, that's actually a really scary thing to be in the driver's seat of my own life. And I'm like, yeah, I really empathize with that because then it's on my shoulders. The outcome is on my shoulders to a degree. And what I said in that moment was, it's true that you need to be in the driver's seat, but you get to pick your passengers. You get to pick who's going to be with you. And so you get to find people who will support you as you kind of stumble your way into this new way of being a human being in the world and can affirm for you that, hey, you're on the right track. This is hard, but it's good.
Mhm.
And it makes sense to get someone to help tailor make that because it depends on what phase of life you're in too, what your goals are going to look like,
Yeah.
and those people around you, and I
Hmm.
mean what kind of support structures you already have in place, maybe that you don't
Hmm.
even already recognize.
Hmm.
Amber, any thoughts on that? Because someone's already messaged in with another question.
Yeah, no, good.
And and this one here, you might have some perspective on. This individual says, "How do you navigate a high school graduate showing little interest in going to college when I, the mom, value it greatly? How do you pivot the relationship at life markers with your kids when they still live at home but aren't going to school?" It speaks to value systems,
Yeah,
relationships. I mean, there's a little bit of everything in there.
yeah, yeah. Okay, so what comes to mind is that there's probably some prep work that would need to go into a conversation like that. One is, do you have that kind of relationship already built to have an honest conversation, to ask questions like, I'm curious, and I think that's probably where you start is, I'm curious about this. So I'm curious about your decision to not go to college. I know we love having you here, but also we know you can't stay here forever, and I hope you know you can't stay here forever. I'm curious about your plans about that. I'm curious at what point you'd like to move out of the basement. But I'm curious about that because you may hear things like, I have no idea what I want to do. So you may hear fear of failure, and it'd be better to not try than and fail than to go and like just crash and burn. But I know that when I was headed to college, I mean, I was very ambitious. I was a very good student. I was absolutely terrified I wouldn't keep my 4 point. And so I wasn't sure I wanted to do that. Also, I didn't know what I wanted to do, and I didn't want to waste the money. So I had some pretty good reasons as to why I wanted to wait a year. Um, but I was told I was going, no questions asked, go find something. That's its own story for a different episode. But curiosity. I'm curious about your decision. And then second, is this something that we could explore together? And so what are your interests? And this is also an opportunity I have really seen with Spencer, who's headed off. He just turned 18, he's headed off, but to really speak that blessing, which we've already been doing, but to speak that blessing, like these are some places that I
Hmm.
really see gifting in your life. And I'm excited to see how God uses those. Maybe it isn't a college degree. Maybe it's a trade program that where you would enjoy doing welding so that you can really pursue some of this hobby on the side and see where that goes. Just being able to be curious with them, to hear their heart on it about what is holding them back from what you would perceive as the next step. And then also just finding a way to give them, okay, if college is really off the table for you because you see this is something that you'd like to do, XYZ. Maybe you want to start a lawn care business and you feel like you're going to be able to do just fine doing that. Maybe you want to be a painter, right? Like maybe there's a trade that you really want to do. You want to start a house cleaning business. I don't know. But is there a way I can help you get set up? Because it's not really an option for you to do nothing. So what is, and we have puppies here on our farm that golden retrievers. And we had a veteran that came last summer to buy a puppy with his high school senior daughter, and she had decided she was not going to school. She did not want to do college. School was not her thing. She didn't feel like she was a good student. It wasn't a fit. She was just glad to finally be done. And he said, well, you got to do something, a little bit of this, like, well, what would you want to do? And she said, I really love dogs and I would love to try my hand at doing dog breeding. And so she had done incredible research. What were the licenses needed? So I think as long as there's movement, that's part of it. But also sit with them long enough, take them out for coffee and sit over breakfast or whatever, time away, and ask them, be curious about it.
Ryan, what thoughts do you have on that? The transition. They may not be moving in the direction that your hopes and dreams and your values uh, foresaw them moving towards. And how do you do that, especially while they're still living at home?
Hmm. undoubtedly it's a really challenging time because you're kind of moving from I'm the authority figure to I'm a coach at best, and it's up to you what you do with it, and that can be hard. I like what Amber was saying, kind of starting with the assumption of strength and success. Like, hey, here's what I see. Here's what you're capable of. And then looking for fear or pain that may be creating hindrances to them living that out. And I do see that fear piece coming through quite a bit, particularly with that age group. You
Mhm.
know, they're kind of wrestling with the question of, do I have what it takes?
Right.
And that can be a really scary thing to have to actually answer and face. And it's easier to sometimes just hold back, or sometimes there's almost this paralysis that can happen. And so having just that arm around the shoulder approach that says like, "Hey, we're going to get through this. I see what you're capable of, and I believe it for you, and I'm going to help walk with you into that new place."
One of the things we told Spencer was, we're not redecorating your room as soon as you leave. Like, and we're joking because we totally are. But no, I'm just kidding.
Treadmill
But
has to
just
go somewhere.
just reminding him that we're always here, but we do have an expectation and an excitement to see you succeed. So we're here, we're going to walk this with you, we're going to help you figure it out. We're not expecting you to turn 18 and as soon as you send out that college application, you're on your own and figure it out. It's
Hmm.
like, hey, you're probably still going to see me showing up on your text thread and in your dorm room with cookies, right? So just reminding them that it's not the end.
Yeah, somewhere between getting kicked out of the nest and still being a part of the pack, to mix my metaphors there. But I'm
Yes.
known for terrible metaphors, so it's fantastic. If you have more questions, keep on sending them in. You're going to do that through the free Grace Story app. Just download that. When it opens up, it's the first screen there. It says we're live, and you can type in your question, name or not, anonymous, whatever you want. Throw it in there, and we'll ask your questions. This one here from a person says, "How do you get emotional needs depth met in a healthy way if your partner isn't healed or open?" There, we'll start with Ryan on that one. Read it one more
Mm.
time. How do you get emotional needs or depth met in a healthy way if your partner isn't healed or open there?
It's a really tricky place to be because you can't force it. And if you try and force it, it's going to create resentment.
Mm,
And the my encouragement would be um, try and take an invitational approach. Like, hey, I I see that there's a whole lot going on inside of you that then meets the eye. And I know it's scary to maybe even let someone in to see that, to see the fear, see the questions, to see the dreams even. But I really want to be a safe enough person that you can do that with. And to be honest, I want you to be that for me. I want I believe you are, and want you to even more become the kind of person with whom I don't have to pretend and with whom I can be real. And can we find a way to make that something that happens in our relationship? And sometimes that takes a lot of individual work, depending on that person's story, but sometimes an invitation in that way is enough. Um, I I do work with uh, a lot of men in my practice, and you know, men get the rap of being, you know, shallow, or what's the word I'm looking for? Just not deep thinkers or not deep feelers. And sure, sometimes there's an element of that that's like, yeah, I'm really okay. There's really nothing wrong. I really do have a nothing box, whatever it may be. But for a good many men that I've talked to, I would say the vast majority actually, uh, when you start sitting with them long enough and you start earning trust and they start feeling like they can let their guard down and don't have to pretend anymore, then it starts like a floodgate. Things start coming out like, oh, yeah, I feel this. I don't know what to do with this. Or I have this reaction and I don't even know why. Can you help me figure out why? Because that is societally our society has not done a great job of allowing that to be a thing for men. Many times men um, are not always told this explicitly, but it's implied that you have to stay up on that horse. You have to meet those expectations and obligations, and understanding like, no, you have a right to not have it all together sometimes too. And you can find people that can join you in your car, your passengers, that you don't have to pretend with. I can't remember who it was. I read this quote once that said, we need people in our lives with whom we can cry and still be counted as warriors. And men in particular, I see are craving that, but not always able to experience that. So long-winded answer, but try and take that invitational approach and assume that there's depth there and invite them into something.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of
Love that.
times men are like that plane doing its pass. You're cleared for landing, and like doing another safety check. I'll be back around.
Yep.
We're in a traffic pattern. You're like, land already. It's clear. Let's go. Like, nope,
Yep.
one more time. That's why fires are so fantastic for men. We sit there, talk about nothing for like an hour, and all of a sudden something drops. It's like, oh,
Mm-hmm.
this is a safe fire. Okay, we're
Mm-hmm.
okay.
And also
Amber,
like
any thoughts on
quotes
that?
just like that, what Ryan just said. Those he is the curator of our quotes over on the GraceStory app. So those come out every day. And there's sometimes where I'm like, screenshot, share. Like it was good. They're just good. So let
Mm-hmm.
Ryan do the reading for you and just get the quotes.
Yeah, when he was putting those in, we realized there's way more than 365 here.
his quote list has a set for the next 7 years.
They don't repeat. They don't repeat. This one here, and I'll throw it to you, Ryan. Back over to you. How can I approach my husband in a way that doesn't come across as mom-like? In other words, how do I raise concerns or share my needs in a way that doesn't threaten his control?
It's a great question. And I'll start with an assumption or a caveat first. I'm going to assume that this is the kind of guy who is doing the best he can, is not trying to be difficult or problematic, and is wanting to be helpful and grow, but just doesn't always know how to do that well. That's different than the person who is all about image management, where you better comply because I need you to do what I tell you need to do in order to feel okay. Okay, that's a different thing to kind of approach. For that one, you need a different kind of approach. So I'll start with the assumption that this is someone who is not on that end of the spectrum and is just doing the best they can. It's helpful to use I statements instead of you statements. Instead of saying, I've asked you to do this for me 15 times over the past month, and you seem to not be getting it. What's wrong? That's different than saying like, hey, this is really important to me, and I, I, I know we've talked about it before, and I'm not trying to be nagging, but because it's important, I'm bringing it back up again. Is there something that we can do to make this happen? Um, Again, invitational, inviting to collaboration. And then trying to lead with vulnerability instead of criticism. So, um, starting with, hey, let's say it's something about um, not feeling seen. Instead of saying like, you never listen to me, or why don't you ever fill in the blank, starting with some vulnerability, which means saying something like, hey, I really long to feel safe with you, and I long for us to kind of have the kind of relationship where I don't have to worry that when I bring stuff to you that it's going to blow up or become a big deal. And I want to foster that. Can we talk about how to do that? And I want to be that for you. How can I help you feel that with me? And start by also affirming the strengths that they have. Hey, I can tell you're trying really hard in this situation or this parenting thing. I saw that you were doing your best and it just was not going well. Do you want to brainstorm? Like, what can we do about that? Or, what are our takeaways for next time this situation rolls around with our teenager?
How do we get our kid out of the house to
There
go
we go.
Full circle. Full
to
circle.
Yeah.
call back?
Uh, I guess the last thing I'll say is Brene Brown has this idea of assume graciously. So assume that the person's doing the best they can and they're not intentionally trying to be recalcitrant or difficult until they prove you otherwise. And then if that's the case, then you take a different approach. Then you know what you're dealing with a little more clearly than if uh, without that information. If you start with the assumption that the other person is trying to be difficult and they're really not, it immediately puts them on their defense and usually makes it much harder to find a way towards a win-win in the situation.
And more questions are coming in. And if you send in a question, you're not just like one and done. Keep on sending your questions in because this is your time. We have a whole another hour, I believe. We're here till 8:30. So send in your questions. We're here for you. This is a way that we can connect with the Grace Story community and keep the community moving in the right direction. On kind of the same topic, this individual writes in, what are the best ways to overcome fear of physical touch from the opposite gender after previous trauma? How do I get my body to stop trauma responding? How does one know when it is actually safe to trust another? Piggybacking on a lot of what you just said, Ryan.
Yeah, that's a heavy question. And to even be able to ask that kind of question, I'm sure there's a whole story there that um, I hope someone is listening to because that's a story that needs to be heard. Just to jump into an answer to it, some of that is going to be trauma work, things like attachment focused EMDR that can be really helpful in going back and looking at some of those old hurts. Something that moves beyond just traditional talk therapy into something that has more experiential interventions like EMDR or developmental relational trauma work, things like that. So that can be a really important starting point. That way, you're not just trying to override your body because your body usually is trying to tell you that something needs attention when you're getting those kinds of responses. Which, if I can do a quick side note here, those kinds of responses are your body's way of trying to keep you safe. That says, okay, the last time you were in a vulnerable situation like this, you were really, really harmed. And we need to avoid anything that even comes close to that in the future. In psychological terms, it's called generalization. It's like it moves beyond the incident whenever that occurred with whomever that occurred and gets generalized into other relationships that may be safe. And so it's very understandable. And in essence, what you're trying to do is help your body learn that this person in this situation is actually safe. So assuming that you're doing the trauma work to actually go back and heal whatever the wound is around that early abuse, then there are things that you can do to kind of slowly help your body learn that it's safe with this new person. And there are some specific kind of protocols that kind of help you learn to edge into that space. Okay, what's it like just to sit next to this person and to do that until your body feels comfortable with that? And that could take a while. And then what's it like to hold this person's hand? And then once you do that until it feels comfortable, okay, then what's it like to hug this person? And you just kind of slowly edge your way in. And what you're doing is you're working in coordination with your body to try and help your body understand that this is now a safe experience.
And I realize some of this, we're kind of scratching the surface, and it's been said a couple times, and that's something you would walk through with a counselor or a licensed professional. So if you find that, hey, there's something there where I feel like I need a little follow up, our whole vision here at Grace Story is a future where faith and mental health actually meet
Yeah.
And anyone at all who's seeking wholeness has access to resources for that healing. So you could reach out, Ryan at GraceStoryMinistries.com, Nate at GraceStoryMinistries.com, reach out to Amber as well via email. I think that is that one, Amber at GraceStoryMinistries.com. We made it
I've
simple.
seen a trend there.
Yeah. Yeah. We just, if you know the name, you can do it. Keep sending those messages in through the Grace Story app as well. Amber, we'll start with you on this one again, off the cuff. Here we go.
Can
This
I
individual
piggyback
writes,
real quick on
"Oh,
that?
absolutely, yeah. If you have
This
thoughts, go for it."
this isn't in a marital setting, but also with that idea of physical touch and relearning. For me, I had to do that with my kids, and just even knowing that appropriate physical affection and affirmation is healthy and necessary. And so as I worked through some of my trauma processing, I had to, I remember there were days where I would, like a whole season where I had to relearn how to give that to my kids. And that included, like, we homeschool. So there would be things like, this would be a good time to put my hand on their shoulder, and or to make time to kiss them goodnight, or give them, create that habit of a hug and a kiss goodnight, or things like that, that I would then guilt myself for, like, well, that should just, I mean, every parent should just naturally want to do that without feeling like this is an icky thing, or that this is um just that everything in me is like recoiling while I'm reaching for my kid. So out of my own story, I just want to normalize that for any parents who are like, I just really struggle giving my kids physical affection, because it's not something we ever did. And is it really necessary?
Mhm.
If you push past that, um, I used to get pegged a lot as like, oh, Amber's not a hugger. You're not gonna want to hug her. She's not a hugger. And but then I found myself, as I did trauma processing, going through part of that time thinking, okay, well, I have this reputation as not being a hugger, but I would really like a hug. Like, we shared our family story for a while, and I used to get people that would come up to me after the story and they would say, you're so strong. Like, it's amazing. You stood up for your family like that. And we shared part of a different sibling's story in that. And they're like, oh, I just want to give that kid a hug. And I would go back to Darren and say, I don't always just want to be the strong, independent, like confident one that just functions really well, independent of all needs of other people. But I don't know how to break out of that. And that is something that I had to do a lot of work around. And by saying a lot of work, or what Ryan has just said about doing experiential therapies, like those, I remember being at the beginning of this, and I heard Brene Brown say she did something like 10 years. And I looked at Darren, I was like, I don't have that long. Like, that, I'm not doing this for that long. That's insane. I need to get in, maximize my money, make some progress, and move on with my life. And being able to accept that at first it can feel really scary, and hearing these things like, oh, do EMDR, what does that even mean? I don't know what that means. um we we do blogs around this stuff, we do newsletters, you can research it. You don't have to know. When you go in, you don't have to tell your counselor how to do your counseling any more than when I go in to my MD and say, I don't really know. I've got this mole, and here's the process I want you to do because I want it removed, and this is what the plan is, and this is what we're going to do.
Please don't
Right?
do it that way. Yeah,
Right.
please
Like,
don't do that.
because Chat GPT, no, just kidding. Um, they're like, thanks, then go home and have chat remove it. But this isn't yours to know everything to go in when you're
Yes.
going in. But there are some good key questions that you can ask your counselor. And one of them, in my opinion, is, are you qualified to do EMDR? Even if you don't know what it is. If you have any kind of level of significant trauma, childhood trauma, or things that are feel stuck in your life, that's just my opinion. Ryan may have another, but I feel like that's one that is good to ask. Brian, there might be another one that comes to mind where you're like, just ask this as a starting point. But I know we're derailing a little bit, but just we should probably do a whole blog on that. What to ask your
Yeah,
counselor.
actually, that is a great idea. I like your like, do you know how to do EMDR? Are you trained in EMDR? You could also broaden to say like, how do you work with trauma? And if
Yeah.
they simply state like, oh, we just talk about it. Okay, well, many times, not every time, but many times, especially deep-seated trauma needs more than just talking about it,
Yeah.
because this is more than just a left brain issue, which is kind of where that logic, language, linear thought piece of you comes from. It's really connected with the right hemisphere, which you can't really access by strictly talking about it. You need something that's more experiential. So they should be able to kind of help you walk through some of those things and like, yeah, here's what I here's how I do it. Here's what I've seen work, and other folks that I've helped navigate similar situations with.
Yeah.
And also, they shouldn't feel threatened by you asking. If they get really defensive, I'd say I'd use that as
You're
a red
clear.
flag.
Yeah.
Like, no, this is someone who wants to understand what they're getting into. That's an understandable thing.
Right.
Yeah, I think the general public don't necessarily understand in the counseling world. There are different specialties, just like in
Yes.
medicine. You don't go to an oncologist for a broken bone.
Hmm.
But there's different specialties. There are different things that people are good at. Piggybacking on what Amber said about physical touch when it comes to your kids, a great resource would be a guy that came to conference, Dr. John Trent. He talks about the blessing, the five elements of the blessing in our relationships. Talked about kids a lot, and I believe the first one on there is meaningful and appropriate touch. And so even within that, there are ways that are necessary for our kids in their development, and touch is one of them. Creating that and showing them what safe and appropriate touch looks like,
Yeah.
modeling that for them. And if that wasn't modeled for you, I mean, that's not shame on you. That's just where you're at, and recognizing that is paramount and can move you in the right
Hmm.
direction. This one here, in Amber, this kind of piggybacks on your thinking and going through some of that. Any advice on root thoughts to begin thinking internally to catch oneself and step out of hypervigilance and anxious attachment? I'll read it one more time. Any advice on root thoughts to begin thinking internally to catch oneself and step out of hypervigilance and anxious attachment? I know you've been there.
Well, I don't think there's anything wrong with hypervigilance. It saved my, I'm just kidding. I use it regularly and nothing bad has ever happened to
It's
me
my
since
best
I've done
tool.
this.
Best
So,
tool.
oh my word. I mean, we can make all the jokes, you can watch all the reels about it's not paranoid, it's just prepared. All of these things, but when you live with this truly, um it can be life altering and it can be joy sucking. Um and I heard actually Lisa Turkhurst talk on this just recently. Um Maybe I'll share that video to my page over on Facebook for people who want to go find it. But um, she talked about having this kind of hypervigilance and fear, and how she'd go to even just going to the ocean. She just made it a regular habit. She took a good book. She's like, I'm not going in the ocean. There's crabs, there's sharks, there's tidal. Like, I'm going to enjoy it. I'll hear it. I get some sun. I don't do water. Right. But then she saw her friend out with a boogie board, just having fun, laughing, enjoying life. And she decided that part of her new philosophy was to say yes, just to try some things. And what was, well, I mean, yes, the worst that could happen is she could be eaten by a shark, but maybe don't go there. But say yes and give it a try. And she found herself running into the water and enjoying it, finding some of that unexpected joy. So being willing to not pack all the things in your purse or your go bag, um, having some planned spontaneity where you say, okay, maybe I'm just going to pack a $10 bill and if I run out, I run out, right? Like I'll get home. For me, it's just terrifying. Like I'm the
Yeah,
kind of
not
person, not
doing
really
that.
terrifying, but for me, I'm the kind of person that's like, I've got water bottles for everybody. Everybody's got snacks. I got to make sure that I've got, the extra change of clothes. And I've just thought through everything, which I want to say this, there's gifts of dysfunction where that has become a gift in some ways because I think through those details for people when I'm hosting or when I'm doing an event. I try to forecast what are the things that people will need. But when I'm doing that every day in my own life, it really does keep me from just jumping in. And I'm sure that there's some underlying things that are there. There's probably some reasons. But it goes all the way back for me to my earliest memory of this is being in first grade. And my dad gave me some change to buy UDF at the Children's Museum, um, and ice cream that day with my classmates. And I went up and I took an additional dime, I think it was, or a nickel, because I wasn't sure if he'd given me enough for tax. And I didn't want to be embarrassed in front of all of my friends. And I got to the bottom of the steps and he said, "Did you take more money off of my dresser?" And I was like, "Yeah." He's like, "Then put it all back." And I remember sitting there like, no ice cream with my friends because I had stolen money from my dad. It was a really big thing. But in my heart, I was just worried. Like I didn't know. And again, this is part of that getting the story straight. I internalized that I was a horrible, horrible child, that I would steal from my dad. And as I did, and this is just, no shame. I'm not trying to pass shame back, but as I got older and saw the broader picture of our family, this was me as a first grader, not sure if I could trust that I had been taken care of. Whereas my kids would be like, they gave me $1, I'm spending all of it. Um, they're so finding out maybe what is that narrative coming from that leaves you feeling like I am the one responsible for keeping myself safe, for keeping those around me safe. That's a lot of control and responsibility to carry. And I'm really sorry that you feel that because I understand that. And it is a pretty heavy weight.
And I'll this next question kind of piggybacks on what you're talking about. So Ryan, with your response, I'll add this question on top of it. How do I reprogram my body out of away from the freeze response? I still don't understand how that automatic response is supposed to protect me, as it actually ends up allowing more to physically occur towards me. It happened again this Friday, and of course, I was then re-traumatized and had flashbacks, etc., etc. I should know better, and yet I feel like something in me wants to trust and doesn't want for the rest of my life to be unfairly judged. Other the rest of my life unfairly judge other men by what happened to me in the past, but yet I also want to be safe. They also say I've actually done EMDR also, but unfortunately, the deep seated traumas again resurface with the flashbacks, even including body memories. So, the first part of that, how do I reprogram my body out of away from that freeze response part of it?
It's a tough question. And there are a lot of variables, so I'm not sure that I can give a definitive answer because there's just a lot that depends on your story. Um, but first of all, I do appreciate the vulnerability of even asking a question like this. That took some strength to be able to put into words. So the freeze response is is there to lessen the pain when the end feels inevitable. And it often, and I say that even physically, like if you are being chased by a bear in the woods, the bear catches up, it's standing over you, your body will likely go into this space. And when that happens, uh, your body literally starts to become desensitized to the feeling of pain. You become less attuned to the sound of a human voice. Especially for young kids, sometimes they will literally check out from reality, like their brain will just shut down and not encode the explicit memory. Their bodies will keep that memory, but that's why that freeze response is there. But it can be really challenging, especially in the situations you're describing, where as an adult, your logical brain knows that you have power, knows that you can do something different, but still feels like it gets put back into that really young space. So, what do you do with that? I am glad that this person has already done some EMDR. And when I hear things like this come up after trauma work has been done, I don't think that means that the trauma work wasn't effective or it didn't work. It just means that there's more there to be done. With EMDR, you have what are called tracks, and so you kind of go down a track until you reach the end, and you go back to the original event. Well, this may tell you that there's more tracks that need to be explored. Um, in developmental relational trauma therapy work, it may mean figuring out, am I being put back into kind of a young ego state? Do I feel like that little child? Do I feel like that teenager or who didn't have power, who just had to say yes? Okay, then how do we help that functional adult part of you learn um, that you do have power in the present? How do we allow that functional adult self to be more accessible in moments like that in the future? So, getting a therapist who's trained in that could be helpful. Um, Again, there's a lot of variables in this, but I would say at its core, it might mean that there's still some more work to be done around that early wounding, and that is not a a knock on the work that has already been done. It just means that there's more, because your body just doesn't do that because it's weak or because it's trying to be difficult or make life hard for you. It's doing that because it endured a tremendous amount of pain and it's trying to say, like, we can't go back there. We don't want to go back there. So let's listen to that and see what it's trying to tell you.
Yeah, personally on that, I mean, it'd be great if we were robots and we just downloaded the software and now we're good.
Yeah.
We've got, the next iOS operating system on. I mean, personally for me, there was one like having kids opened up a lot of stuff for me. But then, we worked through some things with my therapist, and then here we are, 3 girls, and now I have a boy. So now it's baby boy. So now if there's things popping up again, you're like, well, hold on. And I would hate to use the word relapse with that or something. It's not that kind of thing. I feel like that word doesn't fit there. But yeah, it's not static, especially for me personally. Amber, throwing this one over to you because we have several more questions. Thankfully, we have almost 40 more minutes. This person writes in and says, do you have any tips for good communication in a marriage where one person is very emotional and the other one is very unemotional? There's a disconnect because one longs for understanding and the other one can't comprehend deep emotions.
Did Darren text you? Oh, these are anonymous. So this
Darren's
was
going to
safe for
listen to
him.
this.
No, I'm just kidding.
It is
Send this
anonymous.
question to Amber. No, I'm just kidding.
It could be anyone.
No, I'm just kidding. Um, I just chuckle because this does mirror what would feel true in our marriage sometimes, because I would be the more like emotional and let's talk it out and let's figure out the problem. And I mean, there's a reason I'm doing the webinar and not Darren. And then Darren's approach in general is let's keep swimming, just keep swimming, right? Like he's very consistent. And the truth of that is we both have actually very deep emotions. And so, but it would feel like because he's a little more avoidant on that and like, let's just get you to calm down and make sure everything feels okay again. Those have fancy terms that Ryan could label for me. Dr. Rick gave them to me and I had to write them on a piece of paper because it was like something avoidant. And then there's me that's, highly functionally like, or dysfunctionally loves to tackle all the emotions. That does not make them not capable of deep emotion. I hear what Ryan just said. And even at the top of this conversation, Ryan, how you mentioned about that freeze response or that, like, it's not really been safe for me to have emotions. We all are emotional people.
Mhm.
How we portray those comes and goes in different forms. And for Darren and I, so I'll just use our example, but for Darren and I might have that really emotional response like finances. That's a trigger for me. We just had a conversation this afternoon again. I'm like, we're all there, we're drowning, we're dying, like we're never going to finish the reno. And he's like, well, we just have to get it, we just have to talk through it and see where we are. This is where we're at now, and it's going to be fine, right? And then he goes and works in the barn, and I'm like, he doesn't want to talk about it. He just doesn't want to talk about it. But now he knows that this is something I need. I need to know that you haven't just like walked away, and I need to know that he needs that space to process everything we said. And so I'm actually gonna, this is very impromptu. I'm gonna read you his text. He would be okay with this. But I'm gonna read you his text that he sent me.
Here we are
And he
live.
said, "Hey, this was at 5:54 tonight, so this is just soon before this conversation. Hey, honey, and this is from Darren to me. Hey, honey, I know seeing all those numbers is kind of painful. It is for me too. I'm not done working with you on this process of budgeting and figuring out what we're going to do with all the home reno baloney. Um, I'm not walking away. We have more work to do together. I love you." So it was just a reminder, like to me, that we can come back, we can revisit this conversation. But for right now, you have things that you're going to do. I needed to switch my brain space to be a part of the webinar this evening. He's going to, bleach out dog kennels or whatever. Like he has things he needs to do. We can't just talk this thing into the ground until all of everything, until I feel better, because he needs space to think about it. That does not make him able to handle my emotions. It does not mean he doesn't have emotions. Um, However, I also understand that we've done a lot of work to be at a point where he can send a text like that, and not everybody has that. So that would be just an example of a way that you could do that. And if you've been listening to Ryan give examples of, this would be a conversation you could have, and he's kind of role played that for you. You've listened to me read off this text and you're like, this is all well and good. I wish we had highly functional, like counseling families just like you guys. Um, I would recommend you play this for them. So in case you missed the very top of this, it's going to be on a podcast episode. These are going to be there. And sometimes that is a really good place to start in saying, would you, I feel like I don't always say these things right, but Ryan has a way of saying something that I really wanted to tell you. Would you mind listening to how he said it? Because I just feel like he does a better job of it. Because, I mean, if we could all just have Ryan's voice, that is just like, I'd like to press this button and Ryan could say it for me. Boom. Or like Kathy Sprinkle from conference, where we're like, my self talk has been really bad lately. I'm just going to have Kathy on my shoulder and I'll be like, now I'm going to be my own best friend, right? Well, we don't have that. So this is a resource that maybe it will help initiate that conversation for you,
Mhm.
so you can come at it from more of like, I don't know how to say this well, and I really want you to hear me on it because I'm so for us. And could you listen to this with me? Would you do that?
I'd love to have Ryan's voice. When I hit the CPAP button to start that up, it just automatically starts like he could even read like the user agreement for Apple or something, and I would just go right to sleep. Ryan, before I throw the next question your way, any other thoughts on that or anything we missed that you wanted to add?
Yeah, I can empathize a lot with that. Like Darren, I don't always think quickly on my feet, especially when it comes to emotions. I need space to figure out what I think and feel, and that has been a challenge. I remember this was early in our marriage. Uh, Danny was frustrated about something. I don't remember what it was. It was, it's insignificant, but she got frustrated that I wasn't kind of getting equally escalated and engaged. She's like, I just want you to like get mad, like engage. And I'm like, I can't. I don't know what to say. And I don't think it's going to be helpful if I just start spouting stuff off without me knowing what I think or feel. So we've learned each other
This is
that
me mad. What do you mean?
yeah, she jokes with me a lot. She said, like, is this your happy face, or is this your, like, where are you at? So I tend to be fairly even keel as a rule, not always, but as a rule. So understanding your spouse, and I'll walk this back in a second, but learning to accept them as they are, not as you would have them to be.
Mhm.
Now, that doesn't mean you don't have a right to ask that they show up in a way that's different.
Yeah.
Um, Sometimes, and I hear this fear with guys. Sometimes guys will say, like, I just can't be that for her. She just wants me to be emotional. I just can't do that. I don't think I can give her what she needs. And what I tend to say to that is, not knowing if you can do it is different than not trying. I
Mhm.
think you need to try it. And um, as you said earlier, Amber, which I really appreciated, I don't buy into the belief that some people just aren't emotional. Do I think that some people are more naturally emotionally attuned and aware than other people? Sure. Sometimes people just come into the world that way, hardwired a little bit more. But I don't think that means that we're emotionless. It means sometimes we were never taught how to identify them and what to do with them. And
Right.
if that's you, you are not the only one that has to learn that as an adult. And I get it. It kind of sucks. Like, I wish that that was something that was lovingly taught to you at an age when it would have been easier to absorb and learn. But the fact is, you're here now. And uh, the situations we've been talking about today would indicate that that person is likely in a relationship with someone who wants to see the real them,
Mhm.
who who doesn't have to have the perfect response. They just want to see the real you. And back to Danny and I, that's kind of what Danny is with me too. She's like, I don't mean you have to have it all together. I just want to know what's going on inside your head.
Yeah.
And so that's something I'm slowly working to consistently become better at over time.
Yeah, emotions. It's my understanding that's one of the ways that we are created in the image of God. One of the ways that we're His image bearers, emotions. And this one here, for you, Ryan, they say you have left an abusive spouse, but now you realize all the abuse that your kids went through that you didn't even know about, and you want to be there for them, but you don't want to make them to be re-traumatized by asking questions. What's the best way to be there for them? How do you what's the best way to let them know it's okay for them to ask you anything, even if it hurts?
Hmm. It's a great question. Reminds me of it's actually a quote from an old movie. A husband and wife are arguing, and one says to the other, "Do you really want our kids to come from a broken home?" And the other one says, "I'd rather they come from one than live in one." And sometimes when you live in one, it creates a lot of pain. And uh, sometimes that pain isn't always seen until after the fact. Uh, Not always, but kids can have a way, if they sense that there's just not capacity in the family system for their pain to be seen. Sometimes they'll just kind of bottle it up and turtle up. And it's not until afterwards that you start unpacking what all was happening inside of them. Um, the the answer to the question kind of depends on the age of the kids too. If we're talking about younger kids, then um, taking a an approach where you say, "Hey, there's a lot happening in our family right now, and I can only imagine what it's like to have all the questions and to wonder what's going on with mom and dad and who you're going to see when and are you still going to get to see us? I'm sure there's a lot going on. Do you have any questions for me that you think I can answer for you?" And so you just open the door that way. With adult kids, the conversation goes a little bit different, but there's a core of it that's the same. You're inviting them into something, not forcing them into something. So that conversation could sound something like, "Hey, you know, I've, as you know, I finally made the decision that this is a relationship that I need to get out of because it's just so abusive and painful. And I'm just waking up to just how much baggage I'm carrying from this. And it's made me realize that I can only imagine how much baggage you're carrying as well, as you had to watch this and all that that meant for you. And I'm not going to force you into that conversation, but I really just know that I want to have that if and when you're ready. And if there are specific questions that you have for me, just know I'm I'm fair game, and everything's fair game on the table that you want to ask me. And you have my commitment to not get reactive or defensive. You have my commitment to be curious and take ownership of my side of the street in ways that I didn't get it right. Because the most important thing for me is that you you heal to the very best degree possible. And if I can be a part of that in some way, that's what I want to do for you. So if you take that kind of an approach, that you're laying the groundwork for the person to be invited into it. You're committing that you're going to guard your own responses so that they can be real and not feel like they have to caretake for you in that conversation. And you're stating your highest goal, which is you for their good, their healing. Sorry, I'm very wordy tonight, but anyway, that's
No,
You're the
it's good.
person you and Amber who we're trying to hear from. So please bring the words, Ryan. That's fine.
No, it's
Amber,
good.
before I jump into that next question, what thoughts do you have on that one
I, w-
there?
I would say from a daughter's perspective, so this is a parent asking this question. And I've been asked this question different times from parents at conference or different times of when they've heard my story. Like, so if I'm waking up to this, then how do I do it right now? How do I make myself safe now if I haven't been, or if I haven't been able to be in a space where I knew how to make it safe in our home or whatever. And I like to lead with my mom as an example for this because she has really um, modeled this well. And I know that she ministers to people out of her own journey through this, but she's communicated ways that she has that regret. Like, I wish I would have known what I know now. So I could have saved some of this, or I could have, changed the dynamics in her home or whatever that might be. And what I tell her and what I tell other parents who communicate this to me as well is you're always our parent. You're always our mom. You're always our dad. Even as an adult, we're still learning from you as you model what it looks like to do life in the season you're in and with the awareness that you have now. So when my mom goes and gets the help that she needs and is becoming just a really healthy person, even now in her 60s, this is this is still modeling for us that being healthy matters, modeling a safe place and doing the things that setting the boundaries that are hard, that have a deep cost to them, but they matter. And so it just helps us then, even as adult children, to say this, okay, this is a boundary that I can set. This is something that reinforces my mom loves us. Like and then there have been some very special times where there have been, because she's still learning, just like we're still learning how to be functional adults, right?
yeah.
And there's so much grace that is given on both sides. And I remember sitting in the car one night. It was just her and and I was sharing something, and she sort of like, "Oh yeah, me too," blah blah blah. And it just hit me like, "Oh, I just wanted to share this with you." And she sensed an energy difference in the car, and I like still get teared up when I think about how well she modeled this. And this is something that me as a mom of littles can take. But she said, "You know what? I I can feel something didn't land right. I don't know what it was that I did wrong there, but if you can give me another try, I'd like to listen better." And there was something so safe about that I was able to, I had already in my mind said, okay, that's fine. I'm not going to go there again. Right.
Mm-hmm.
It's just easy. Let's just move on. She made it so safe to try again. And this is some of what we're talking, whether it's spiritual trauma or family trauma. we're risking trust again. And that can feel so vulnerable, and it can feel like it's not worth it sometimes. And so when that person, whether it's your spouse or it's your parent that you're rebuilding relationship with, when they make risk, that trust risk ratio worth it, just by being present with you and saying, I'm not sure what it was, but I'd like
Mm.
to try again.
Yeah.
That's what starts building that relationship back up.
So this one here, fully agree with everything you said, and love it. This one here, I'll shoot it to Amber first, but love your thoughts on both from both of you. I'm not sure how to word my question, but I'll try, and that's all we ask. In my experience in the Christian circle, it seems that we are pushed to forgive and forget, and to act as though nothing ever happened with those who have harmed us, which is especially hard if when they've never genuinely acknowledged the hurt or welcomed any kind of conversation to reconcile the relationship after bringing up the hurt. This feels very triggering and isn't something I've found myself able to do anymore. Instead, I've found myself avoiding these people altogether and refusing to have any interaction with them when they try to small talk or interact with me on social media due to the hurt and trauma I've been through in these relationships. How do you navigate the guilt, the shame you feel for not forgiving them like you felt you're supposed to do, but also the anger that rises up at the push for you to just forgive and forget?
I do have a lot of compassion for this question because I live it. There are times I still live it. And I I would say in some fronts, this is a prayer I continue to bring to God and say, help me forgive, help me to help me to be able to just, you know, be normal around these people, walk the high road of modeling, how you would just love them and just forget that they did this and understand their brokenness and that that's information about them and all of those things that I've heard. Right. And then, you see their name pop up on Facebook, or you see that they're coming to a family reunion, or that person is going to be in church on Sunday or whatever it is, because we're talking about a Christian circle specific to this question. And those feelings of betrayal, injustice, they didn't get their just dues, nobody knows who they really are. Some of those things, they're just very real, and they're things that you have to process through. Um, some of that has been done in a professional setting where you get to sift through, like where I've had to sift through what is mine to forgive, what is mine to let go of, what is information about them that may follow them for the rest of their life, and people will just slowly have the aftermath of being visited by this person. But that didn't make what they said about me true or what they did to me true. It just was painful. Um, just because they tried to strip me of my integrity doesn't mean that they did. There's things like that. At the same time, Ryan, you can hopefully take this and do the counseling perspective of this better than me, but there are times to take a step back and set a pretty rigid boundary that says, I'm trying to heal from this, and it's confusing and it gets muddy when I get back into the arena with you and try to fix this and reconcile and have these conversations, and you're justifying to me again why you did what you did, and then it gets muddy and I feel that guilt and shame again, and I think all these emotions I feel are on me because you're doing fine. It can get muddy. So maybe for a season, maybe it is forever. That's for you to work out with a professional. But there have been times where I've had to take kind of a hiatus from different people in my life. And I will say this: going no contact is never the easy route.
Yes.
in my opinion, in my experience. Um, there is sorrow because if you're going no contact with someone, it's probably not the grocer, it is not your bank teller. It's usually someone that has had significant place in your life and that you have placed significant value on either their friendship or their authority. And it is an absence that is felt and it is a grief that will come up. And sometimes that can come up feeling like guilt. Like, man, if I would just get with the program and go back to that same role and pretend like nothing was wrong, like everybody else, I could also have this relationship with them and things could go back to the way they were. With education, you lose the luxury of ignorance, and but you're healing. You're stepping forward in this, and sometimes healing is not just the like romantic, whimsical thing that everybody makes it out to be. It is good. It is really good. You're changing legacy, you're changing family cycles, all of that. And your response to this is probably creating a ripple, even with people watching, that you could never imagine in instilling courage in other people. But at the same time, it can come at a great cost. I don't know that that's very hopeful, but at the same time, I would say that it's something where you come back to. For me, I have had to come back to repeatedly, turning that relationship over to God to heal, and forgiveness happened, but it does not forget, and it doesn't take away the I like the way Lisa Turker said this the other day in that same clip I referenced earlier. um there's feelings and then there's the outcomes, and so you can forgive for the, oh, it's event and outcomes or something like that, but you can forgive for the event, but you will continue to wrestle through the outcomes and the consequences of that. And that's where we talk about resubmitting, re-forgiving, re-giving that over to God to heal those new spaces as they come up with you.
I'll throw it over to Ryan on that. This also brings up you're struggling somewhat. It brings in this what your moral foundations from your upbringing as well. Where I think it's Jonathan Haidt. He's like a moral psychologist. He's secular, of course, so keep that in mind. But talking about your culture and even overseas, you may have more of a sensitivity to that fairness or justice part of he makes them like taste buds. You're just attuned to that. Liberty and oppression, authority, subversion, all those things from your upbringing, that's going to play into it too. Of you're more sensitive to, well, that's just not fair, and they're not coming out and just being clear about it. And I was raised that we're going to be fair, and justice is going to prevail, and that's not bad. That's just something more to recognize in yourself. Ryan, what thoughts do you have on this? A real sensitive one too. I mean, this is that's a big one.
Now, like Amber said, I have a lot of empathy for this question, and I appreciate what you said there at the end, Amber. That uh, a complete cutting off of the relationship is not the easy route. When I'm working with people in situations like this, one of the places I usually start is asking the question, what kind of a relationship do you hope to have with this person in the future? And that's going to determine the kind of actions that we take. Like you said, if this is the grocer, sure, you can probably cut that relationship off easier, but
Do self
there,
checkout.
yeah, yeah. But there has been this, even within the broader field of counseling, this push to like hold your boundary, cut people off. You need to, take people out of your life in order to stay healthy. And my answer to that is maybe, but
Yeah.
not necessarily. And usually that's the last line of that's the last resort. I do agree that forgiveness and reconciliation are two different things. And forgiveness is part of your individual journey and is not dependent upon the other person. Um, this isn't exactly forgiveness, but I think of Martin Luther King's quote, "I have chosen love because hate is too great a burden to carry." And I think you could adapt that to say, "I've chosen forgiveness because unforgiveness is too heavy a burden to carry." It will eat you alive from the inside out. Now, forgiveness, even in the biblical sense, is an accounting term. You look at the ledger, what was owed, what was done, and then forgiveness is choosing to write a line through that and say, all right, I'm no longer going to say that that has to be repaid to me. That is a very hard thing to do. But what that does is it keeps you from doing this surfacey, quick, easy forgive and forget thing that really doesn't have staying power in the court of real life. It just doesn't last. What does is when you've actually faced the pain of it. I think Brene Brown actually talks about this. I think she calls it a form of a death and resurrection, a death of what you thought would be, hoped would be, dreamed would be, and out of that, building something new out of the ashes of that. And when forgiveness has to happen in a relationship, that's kind of what happens. Wow, here's what I thought you would do. Here's how I thought you would show up for me. Here's how I thought you would take care of me. And you didn't. In fact, you caused me harm. And the closer the relationship, the more painful that tends to be. And you have to face that in the relationship. Now, in this situation, it sounds like the person is not willing to own the ways they harmed you. Okay, well, that's going to limit the degree of reconciliation that can happen. Because unless someone is truly willing to own their side of the street, then that person has shown that they're probably they're at a higher likelihood of harming you again in the future. Back to helping people navigate it, that's one of the things I look at too. Is the person genuinely able to own it and change their behavior? And apologies are good, words matter, but I think they're a letter of intent. It's the walking out of that apology that really allows reconciliation to be on the table for discussion again.
Yeah.
I've got, in the few moments we have left, I've got two more questions. Go ahead, Amber. And then I have two questions that we're going to try to answer completely and succinctly. But in the time, Amber, if you had another thought there.
Yeah, I would just add that for me, forgiveness has, and this is going to sound a little cliche at first, but living it out, it doesn't feel cliche. It feels, it just sometimes hurts. But forgiveness gives me a little bit of a report card on where my relationship is with God, because some of what, in ways that I can trust Him more, be in more communion with Him, because some of what Ryan is saying is, it goes back to that Joseph story of if God is the vindicator, and if I truly believe that God is going to make all things right in the end, and that He's working all things for my good and redeeming those things to restore me to his who I am in Him, then what level of trust do I have in Him? Do I believe that He will keep His end of the bargain? Or is it my responsibility to make justice happen? And that isn't to silence us. I want to make sure that that's said. That's not to silence us or to disempower us, but it is to say, when you can't make something right with reconciliation and find that closure that would just kind of be that nice little tidy bow on top, whether we stay in a relationship or not, when there isn't closure and they're not being held accountable and it just feels wrong, at the end of the day, I have to trust that that is between God and them, and He has promised that He is not someone that is to be mocked, and that He has my good interests at heart. And so that gives me sort of that, like, okay, there's a little work that I can do with God then. And that one I can do. That one I can go to Him. I can talk to Him. I can have honest conversation with God. I can read His word deeper. I can hold His promises firmer. And so go ahead. Next question.
All right. In the time we have left, this one here I don't care which one of you start on it. How are you managing relationships who disagree politically with you right now, especially as tensions rise?
Oh boy.
I'm glad I
Yeah.
don't have to answer. This is for you guys.
So, Nate, we want to throw this back
Oh,
for you.
Ooh.
Oh goodness. There are times where I just have to tell people I'm not a highly political person anyway, so this wouldn't be something that I have really dealt with. Um, but I have friends who are very, very passionate about what's going on. And there are times where I've just had to say, like, if we really can't have meaningful, respectful conversation, we're probably not going to resolve it in my living room anyway. Right. So we can stand up for what we believe in. We can be public about that to the degree we want to be. But if there's not a lot of action behind what you're saying anyway, it's like anything else. I really don't have a lot of time of day to be your vent um, if you're not really even doing anything. So anyway, Ryan, what do you have here?
It's a tough one. This is a topic that comes up very frequently in my office. And to be honest, there's no simple like, all right, do these three things, and there you go. This will be the perfect plan for how to navigate those conversations. It just doesn't exist. So, a few things that might be helpful. Uh, Guard the narrative that you're telling yourself about the other person, because it's easy to create a narrative like, well, they're just the kind of person who fill in the blank. Well, they must not be critical thinkers because they're not. Da, 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 da. Guard that. Back to Brene Brown's idea: assume graciously. All right, I'm not going to throw out every single thing I know about this person because they disagree with me on this one issue. I'm going to look at them as an entire person and say, okay, I know this person and I don't understand how this fits with what I have known of them in the past. And instead of coming across with that one upmanship of kind of almost contempt turned outwards, I'm going to approach with curiosity. Hey, I'm curious about this. Like, I saw that you were really strong on this position, and I'm trying to fit this together in what I know to be true of you. Like, how does this work? Like, tell me how you arrived at that conclusion. And so, when you approach with curiosity rather than criticism, it tends to lead to more productive dialogue. I don't think that means you have to comply or agree or uh, give up your own position, but it does mean the way you approach it is one that's much more curious than critical. Look for look for things that you can agree on. Okay, well, we both know that we can agree on this core issue. We may disagree with how that's going to be executed with certain policies or certain situations, but we can agree on this. Okay. Third, particularly if it's a relationship that's close and significant, don't sacrifice the relationship for the sake of a position on an issue. Issues come and go. Even if they're significant ones, they come and go. That relationship is probably going to, if it's an important one, is still going to be in your life 20 years from now. And the way you engage with it now, the level of respect with which you treat it, is going to be far more important in the long run than whatever the outrage of the day tends to be in the news.
That's really good, solid advice. And I think also too, trying to understand when you're in a conversation that can be politically charged, trying to understand, is this person trying to talk through and understand a certain situation or a political figure with me? Or
Mm-hmm.
is this something where they're trying to convince me to change my mind, which can be fine too. But if you're not open to that, if they're just open to winning an argument, this can devolve quickly. So understanding what kind of
Yeah.
conversation am I in currently,
Yep.
which I tend to think of arguments different these days. I can win an argument if I learn something new about the perspective of the other side. Winning an argument is not just convincing them that I'm right.
Yes.
And it may be
Yes.
someone that they have a high, it's very important that you understand that I'm right on this. And that just, if you understand they're coming from that, you can take a step back and just listen. But that may infuriate them more. So no quick fix on that. I think this one's worth going over. We are at the 8:30 mark, but we'll close on this question sent in. What does a healthy and secure relationship look and feel like between a mother and a child, a father and a child? Start with you, Ryan.
In 30 seconds or less, right? Well, first of all, I appreciate the fact that this question was asked. And also, what I make up about that story is that person is trying to figure that out because they didn't get that. And about that, I feel a lot of compassion. So if that's true, thank you for being willing to ask that question and be curious about that for your own kids. So there are a lot of ways that you can answer that question. At its core, what you're asking, what what you're really looking for is what's called secure attachment, which is not that it's a perfect relationship, but it's a relationship in which your kids feel securely attached to you. And that happens whenever you are a relationship that they don't have to take care of. You take care of them. So they don't have to manage your anger for you. They don't have to manage your fear for you. They have the space to feel their own emotions and know that you can actually help them figure life out. When that doesn't happen, that's a form of what's called parentification. So the child kind of becomes an adult really early and finds a way of having to kind of, the roles get reversed and the child takes care of the parent. So be a sturdy enough parent that your kids can have space to wrestle with their own thoughts, feelings, emotions. To be a place where they know where the parameters are. They know what containment looks like. I've seen sometimes where parents err on either side of this. They can be overbearing and controlling, and they dictate down to every minutia what the child should or should not be doing, thinking or should not be thinking. Stay out of that ditch, but also stay out of the other ditch where you're like completely laissez-faire and the child needs to be allowed to say or do or act in any way they want to say or do or act. Okay, well, that actually creates its own form of chaos for the child. The child needs to know what containment looks like. How far can I go? So, simple example, my son, he has an insane amount of energy. He's awesome. Um, and he would dance and scream all day long. And one day I had to tell him that he's not allowed to do that on the table at McDonald's. Like, nope, that is containment boundary. We don't do that for the sake of the restaurant and also everyone else around. And helping him understand, like, okay, that's not actually something that we're allowed to do. That's not appropriate. So help your kids know what appropriate looks like without falling in either ditch of being over or under engaged in boundary setting. Um, Love. I'll say this. Sometimes um, people are afraid that if they love their kids too much, it's going to cause harm. Like, oh no, I need to be a little more stern. I need to be far off or distant so that they can stand on their own 2 feet. I think I appreciate the desire to want what's best for your kids there, but I think they do that best whenever they're in environments where they feel like they can rest in your love and not have to earn it. Because ideally, kids should be able to rest in that and not feel like they have to behave in a certain way in order to get it. One of the questions I often ask people in my office is, what did you have to do to earn love in your house? And very, very rarely, I think I've had it once where someone said, nothing. Like it was just there. Many, many times it's, I had to, I had to stay quiet or I had to work really hard. I had to complete this. I had to get good grades. I had to do X, Y, or Z. And that creates this dynamic where throughout their whole life they feel like they have to complete a task in order to be worthy of love instead of being able to rest in it. Honestly, I could keep on talking about a good many more traits, but those are a few pieces.
Well, before we leave that though, and either one of you can jump on this, it's not lost on me that that part in there where it says, "And what does it feel like?" What should it feel like?
Hmm. So Monday nights are date nights with my kids, and I alternate on taking them out on dates on Monday nights. So tonight, actually, right before this call, was with my 7-year-old Stephen, and we went to an arcade and played games together, and then we went and got ice cream. And as we're walking from the arcade to the ice cream place, he just slips his hand in my hand, and I melt because he feels safe with me, and that is a tremendous gift to be someone's sorry, to be someone's safe place. So when you said, "What does it feel like?" That's the first thing that came to mind because that's the most recent. Um, to feel genuine love and connection, to desire the best for your child, to feel joy at their joy, to feel pain at their pain. Not in this way where it gets confused and there's no differentiation between you and them, but in a way that, um, yeah, in a way in which you see it and it matters to you. You feel it. Yeah. Amber, how would you answer that so I can collect myself here?
Yeah, I think you said it well. And I think those who are listening, whether it's in person during this call or somebody who's listening later as we replay through the podcast or online, I think there are just a lot of people who long for that genuine feeling of safety and connection. And in one of my recent podcast shares, it's on the blog as well, but we're talking about marriage in particular, not the parent relationship, but that marriage is a reflection of intimacy with God. But part of that is that the next part really matters. So while marriage is a reflection of intimacy with God, it is not a replacement for it. And
Mm-hmm.
that is where we discover true attachment healing and what you're experiencing. And when we can understand, and I am so a recovering, healing on this journey with forever on this. But when we can understand that God is a God who delights in us,
Yeah.
um, as what you're explaining with you and Stephen, when we can truly understand that the joy that my kids bring to our home and Darren and I just by being even in some of their little sassy spicy nugget selves, they're we have that chuckle, that knowing
Yeah.
chuckle that's
Mm-hmm.
like, oh goodness, there's even a way that's going to be redeemed and we're going to watch this unfold,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like there's just this. I think so many of us have hurt and parent wounding that has carried over into how we see God and how we see ourselves because of that. And it's hard to imagine that anybody would delight in us. And it's certainly hard, then to imagine that our kids would, and it just the story can go and go. But I love what you said. I think that really explains the feeling part of this well. There's a part of us that just longs to slip our hand into God's hand and understand that we have that safety and that delight with Him as well. And if we can recreate that and bring that into our relationship with our kids, it just sets them up so well with
Mm-hmm.
a foundation for seeing who He is and how they interact with the world.
Yeah.
Well, we did go over a little bit, but I think it was worth it. The fact that everybody's still in the chat here. I think they also agree. If I didn't get to your question, I am so sorry. But thank you to everyone who sent a question in. You made my job real easy, and fantastic questions, very vulnerable questions. For me, and I'm sure from the GraceStory team, thank you so much for being involved. If I didn't get to your question, we're going to do this again. So this is not a one-time deal. We plan to do this again. I don't know if we'll be bringing in other panel experts or who will be involved. But if you got value out of this, tell your friends about it. And next time bring them in. And I mean, hour and a half of free counseling. Yeah, bring your question. Let's throw it out there. And this is one more way that GraceStory is offering healing and growth and resources for anyone who wants a whole person healing. Go ahead and download that app, free GraceStory app. Get in there, and there's every conference video that we have available is in there for you to view. Listen to the podcast. We'll be back next time. Until then, we'll be praying for you on this journey.